Hello, dear friends, and welcome to video 2 in Cultivating the Writer's Lifestyle. Last time we talked about the number one mistake that most uh, ready advice offers people. In fact, it's most advice having to do with any sort of productivity literature is it tends to fall into the same sort of trap. And when in talking about this mistake, I try to show you that a lot of the advice you hear out there is mistaken because it leaves out an important portion of what it means to be a human being. And so when we're told by these experts to do various things that are meant to improve us, it only improves part of who we are, and therefore is basically um, inevitably going to fail because the most important and is in some ways the most powerful parts of us as writers are left on the back burner for the benefit of an incorrect dichotomy that separates body from mind. It doesn't include things like soul and spirit, and doesn't engage all three of them together in a unifying way that helps us level up competence as human beings. I ended last time with talking about the what and promising you that we would get into the how in this video. And at least partially, that's what I'm hoping to do for you today. As I mentioned last time, I'm using as a framework to talk about this Cal Newport's recent something that he calls the deep life stack, something that he has been talking about for years now and is honing in on in particular as he is preparing to write his latest book, which is going to be a book on the deep life. It's something that he talks about frequently on his podcast, Deep Questions, and it's something that I love to hear from him because he's one of the only people that really thinks deeply and non-traditionally and about the problems that people in this particular moment of time with the technology growing as fast as it is, how we professionals who need this technology to be able to bring our work into the world can navigate it properly so that we are not hampered by it, but rather are helped by it. And in the process, we don't become pale imitations of our technology, but we become better human beings. He makes a wonderful, Cal Newport makes a wonderful distinction between the two stages of getting into a deeper life. He talks about stage one being the stage of becoming a competent human being, and stage two being the stage of transformation and cultivation, where you take what you've built in stage one and already start raising it up higher and higher. This is something that actually a lot of people don't like to talk about or even like to poo poo. The whole idea of there being a kind of basic level of competence that you have to master before you can get to the good stuff. For some people, this is just a matter of lack of time, lack of motivation, lack of desire to work on the mundane things of life, thinking that those things will take care of themselves if we instead focus on the important things, the transformational things, the things that we hope to achieve over the course of a long period of time. But it's simply a fact, and ancient philosophy and theology just bear this out: that if you are not doing the simple things to simply get up to basic level human, then you're not going to be able to do much when it comes to the transformational level human that you hope to achieve as a writer, as an artist, as a creative professional. His stage, his framework is not necessarily the best or the only. I'm using it because I like it, because I like Cal's work, and because he divides the frameworks in such a way that I find useful to be able to, on the one hand, critique, on the other hand, use. So I like the way he does things, and I'm going to take what he does and adjust it just a little bit, considering those things that I talked about last time. Now, I want to bring your attention to the fact that in a lot of self-help literature, there is this pervasive idea that if you have the right mindset, you will be able to bend reality around you in such a way that reality itself will begin to serve the things that you are focusing and paying attention to. This is something that uh, was made famous by Earl Nightingale in his record, "The Strangest Secret." It's something that all the big self-help gurus talk about a lot. And the central idea here is if you want to achieve something, you need to focus your mind, your attention, your thoughts on that thing. And if you think positively enough about it, and I'm simplifying this greatly, of course, but there's a reason why I am, then eventually, if you focus enough on this one thing, everything around you will begin to accommodate this desire. All you need to do is dedicate your thoughts entirely to this process, and not just the process, but the end goal itself. Now, if you've heard video one, you may know where my critique is going to go from here. But the critique should be obvious. There is this overweening attention on the mind as the thing that causes the change, which on a certain level makes sense. We are reasoning creatures. Our ability to reason in complex ways is one of the most obvious ways that we differ from the animals. So it might make sense that this thing that makes us human should be the thing that brings us transformational change. But if you look a little more deeply at the process that Earl Nightingale and the various other self-help gurus use to help people bring about this change, and believe me, this transformational thing does happen to people when they use these sort of techniques of extreme focus and attention and calling down good things from the universe. I've seen it happen, and in fact, it's happened to me, not because I've used those techniques specifically, but similar techniques. And what I've noticed is this: it's not actually the mind that's doing it. What it is the absolute wholehearted attention given by the entire person, body, mind, soul, and spirit, to the accomplishment of the thing. And the fact is that since we are this three in one, multiplicity in unity kind of creature, we are able to accomplish great things. But it's not just us, and that's the thing, and that's the other part that you often hear in self-help literature. Although not much of it is not explicitly religious, they do use spiritual kind of language, and they talk about resonance and happy coincidence and an answer from some other force that is outside of us. This should all not be surprising to you. The thing I want to note here is that so much of the advice focuses on using your mind. Mind, 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 mind. And if you're not paying attention to what they're actually doing, not what they're saying, you might think that all it is a trick of the mind. Therefore, if I train my mind, if I focus in on that one thing, then I will be able to accomplish fantastic things. The fact is that's not true. And they're the people who suggest that the way that they actually do it, in fact, not the way they talk about it, is by using the entire human person. So, that being the case, let's look now at how this particular framework that Cal Newport uses can be useful in bringing us from a focus on mindset only into a focus on lifestyle, which encompasses all aspects of the human person in a way that is intended to focus and attend to certain realities that are meant to make us competent human beings. Meaning, basically, we are preparing the soil to eventually plant the seeds of our cultivated garden of creativity, which is what we'll be talking about in the next video. Cal talks about several concrete steps that can be and should be accomplished simultaneously. He starts with step number one, which is the one nobody ever wants to hear about, and that is discipline. Yes. Now, he starts with discipline because without discipline, none of the other things can possibly happen. Now, he divides discipline into the categories of body, mind, and heart. According to Cal, the body aspect of discipline on this first level of becoming more competent as a human involves taking care of your body on the level of things like fitness, proper eating, making sure you get enough sleep, and balancing work with leisure. Then he has the second category, which is mind. And for him, the leveling up of the mind to become more competent as a human involves learning. And that learning is almost always, in his conception, reading of difficult books. Not because they're difficult, but because difficult books contain important truths. So this is about reading and not simply fluff. Fluff can be part of it. The enjoyment of escapist reading, escapist books, is absolutely a valid and important part of the human experience, but the fullness of what will make us more competent as individuals. And for him, the third level is heart, which I find interesting. But for him, heart is interacting with other people. Now, this is a very important step because it is true that this space and us as creatives tend to become solipsistic. We tend to focus in on ourselves to the detriment of our loved ones and certainly to the detriment of our social life. It doesn't help that many of us are introverts. This one first among them. So he has body, mind, and heart, meaning fitness, sleep, etc. Increase your reading of difficult and useful books. And 3, interact more with other people. I would adjust this. A lot of this is good, but it's missing one of the key components that I talked about last time. Because body and mind, as I argued last time, is the same thing. So in disciplining your body and your mind, you need to do both the fitness things, the making sure that you sleep enough, making sure that you actually are taking care of your body and eating well with the reading part of it. That's actually not body and mind, it is the body mind unity. So that's one thing. The second thing is taking care of your soul. Now, taking care of your soul is the part that people often either conflate with spirit or miss out entirely. This is the cultivation of taste. This has to do with filling the creative well with various inputs of from different artistic disciplines. I'll talk more about that in a second. And the third, heart. Now, heart is not what you do with other people. Heart is spirit, in my conception of it. It is attending to the realities that are beyond us. If you are a religious person, this means actually doing the practices of your religion. We Christians are on the verge of the beginning of Lent, both Eastern and Western Christians this year, interestingly, and the following of the various practices associated with the preparation for Lent, with Lent itself and Easter afterwards, is very immersive. It's very, in our case, as Orthodox Christians, quite difficult, but it's also something that puts into proper perspective the directionality and the hierarchy of the things that we do to become simply competent humans. That is the discipline piece. If you are interested in hearing some examples of how this discipline piece might work, I am going to talk about this more either in video 3 or inside the Story Hearth community, which is my author community that I run. And I'll be talking more about that in video 3. For now, this is the framework. Use it as you wish. The second step after or concurrently with discipline in this stage 1 of becoming more competent as humans has to do with the control of time. Now, I was going to talk all about the different methods you can use to control time, making sure that you block certain amounts of time in your day and do everything you can to make sure you do the thing you're supposed to do in those blocks of time. But I'm going to be a little bit less rigid about this, and I'm going to tell you something quite. I'm going to tell you something that this is a process that I'm constantly growing into. And today I was reminded by a friend and a fellow writer that the control of time is only partially something that we can manage. The realities of being social creatures, whether that means having a family or being a member of a community or both, means that sometimes, in fact, in certain cases, often, our time is outside of our control. And we are often told that the control of time is something that is indispensable. And when we fail to do it due to factors outside of our control, we tend to blame ourselves, or a lot of us do. Some people don't. Now, the reality is that we need to acknowledge this fact. There are certain things that are outside of our control that we are not going to be able to lay a system on top of. Now, there are methods to manage this. Again, these are the deep kind of details that I'm going to be talking about in future videos and inside my author community. But just to give you the permission to know that the reality is there's only a certain percentage. And for some of us, it's quite low. 10, 20% of our time is something that we can actually control. But once we acknowledge that fact and set aside the unrealistic expectations of ourselves that we would somehow be able to put in tremendous amounts of time into our creativity. At least let us determine what is the sliver of time that we have in our control. Once we do that, then we can begin to control that sliver. And it is part of that control is something that is very important for us, and that I talked about a little bit in the last video, and that is that we need to do everything we can to eliminate distractions and to help us be attentive and focus. Now, focus is a word that's very popular in the productivity space. Being attentive, I think, is a better one, because there is something about giving your whole self's attention to a task that activates the entirety of your person, body, mind, soul, and spirit, to the doing of a thing. That is what we're talking about here. So, the practical thing is you want to do everything you can to eliminate technology's incursions into that sliver of time that you can control. This means, if you can, follow the principles of Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism. It's a wonderful book. Highly recommend it. Go and get it. In short, it means doing things like, when you are in your workspace, keep your phone away from your boss, and hopefully, preferably in a different room entirely. Because those periods that you are decided that you're going to be attentive, you put away the phone just for that period of time, the world is not going to end if you do that. Believe me. And if it's a real emergency, there are ways of getting to you that do not necessarily involve this very recent technology that we lived without for hundreds of years. The other thing that you might want to start doing is limiting the automatic or autonomic access to internet that is going to happen when you start focusing intensely on anything, especially if that focused work is happening on a computer. Some of the best and most prolific writers that I know actually use the simple hack of having two computers: one computer for all internet related work, and one computer which has no connection to the internet, creative work entirely. You might also do things like write in a notebook and keep your computer far away from you when you do it, or even do things like have two desks or two separate work areas that you engage in separate jobs. You do busy internet related administrative work on one desk and in one area of the house or office, and you do creative work in an entirely different area. A lot of writers use cafes to write. If you're somebody who's not bothered by white noise, or if you're somebody who can use noise canceling headphones, that is certainly something that I would recommend. It's certainly something that has helped me a lot. The final thing that I want to say about this particular stage is that this is a stage where you start developing the idea and the desire for craftsmanship as a identifying characteristic of you as a writer. It's very important that we understand that development and cultivation of taste and of objective craft ability, whether it's writing or other artistic pursuits, is not something that we can simply wish away. We need to learn how to cultivate our taste and how to cultivate our ability. And this is right here on this level. This is where we do it. We do this in the discipline stage. We do this as part of our discipline, as part of the steps that involve body, mind, and soul, not spirit so much, because that has to do with things that are outside and support. Actually, they interpenetrate the whole process, but they have less to do with the specifics of our art than they have to do with the specifics of our striving towards something that is greater than ourselves, that is outside of ourselves. So I want you to really start thinking that there should be an ethos of craftsmanship that imbues everything you do, including the body part, including the mind part, including the soul part, including the spirit part. This means that for me, for example, it meant that it wasn't enough for me anymore um, to simply decide on being more physically active. It wasn't enough for me even to do something like um, follow a specific training plan. I tried both things. For me, what it meant was I had to make my body mind training something that was an art in and of itself. So I decided to take up something called adventure racing. I'm not going to talk any more about that here, but it's something that involves all aspects of your person, focusing especially on the physical, but involving all of it, that never has an endpoint in its potential cultivation. And even though that has nothing to do with writing, the actions that I apply towards becoming more competent in that thing absolutely do help when I sit down and I'm faced with the blank page and the absolute terror of not knowing whether I will be able to get over the hump of beginning a new thing, which happens every single time. Once we manage to at least start the process of stage one, we have to embrace the fact that this is a stage that has no end, that it is a spiral or a helix that constantly moves towards an ideal and never really reaches it, but constantly improves, iterates, and moves further and further towards it. That doesn't mean, though, that we stop here, because this still is only the level of competence. It's not the level of transcendence. How do we get to the next level? Talk about that in video 3 coming next week.